Welcome to Handcrafting Your Retirement with your host, Brett Ramsey, where we talk about what you want in retirement and how to make it happen. I'm Wendy McConnell. Well, Brett, are you going to tell me one of your fantastic stories?
Well, Wendy, I got a doozy for you this week, I had a chance to travel out east recently and I went to New Jersey. And so I'll do my best Jersey accent because it
Hey.
was cracking me up the entire time I was there. And so it being the season, I was just met a lot of interesting people on this trip. But one of the things that happens sometimes when we travel is my wife and I, um, we try to lay out a plan, right? We had a plan, and this particular day we were going to visit and watch my son play lacrosse, and the game times changed. So we'd made this great plan in advance, and we were going to do it in a day. We were going to fly out in the morning to New York, fly into LaGuardia, which anybody that's ever been there knows that's a bit of a hassle. Get our little rental car, drive out to the field, watch two games, get back in the rental car, drive back, and catch the evening flight home. It was a great plan until the schedule completely changed. And so the 12 and 3 o'clock games became 3 and 5 o'clock games. And so our ability to watch that last game and get back to the airport was all at risk and in jeopardy. And so my wife said, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And I was like, "Well, let's just see how the day plays out." And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "Well, it's a scrimmage and our son's been injured. He might not even be playing in the second game. And at this time of year, there's a lot of thunderstorms and the flights are not always on time. So maybe we'll get lucky and the flight will get delayed." And so we're sitting there, and it was kind of funny how I don't like to have like a crystal ball, but everything kind of played out exactly like I thought it would. We
Most
went
people
throughout the
don't wish
day.
for a delay, but go
Yeah, I
ahead.
didn't wish for a delay for our flight, but it did. And so we ended up getting on that last flight and got home, and everything kind of ended up exactly as we expected. But to be honest, I think this is really a scenario that most of us live through when we travel. But it's really what happens a lot in retirement, right? Is that we can lay out a plan, and we can double check it and we can make sure everything's right, but then all of a sudden somebody else's situation or circumstances change, and we need to make an adjustment and we need to be flexible. And so really with Ken and Tami here today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and give us a little bit of their background. I've been working with them for several years, working on their retirement plan, and not that it's changed a ton, but it's something that is always the there's adjustments and there's changes. Just in the last few months, actually, some things have changed, and we've set some dates and some timelines. And so I think I always like to try to still tell stories that people can relate to a little bit, because I think it's hard sometimes for people to visualize something they haven't done before. So try to relate it to something that they have done. And so today, I really want to let Ken and Tami really tell their story as much as possible about this journey of trying to figure out what I call how and when to retire, and then to make sure that their money lasts at least one day longer than they do. So with that, I'm going to start with Tami and let her introduce herself first, and then she can transfer it over to Ken. So Tami, just give us a little background on who you are and tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, I'm Tami Maynard, and I think Ken and I have been married since 1986. So I don't know, 30 something years, I guess. We have two kids, and they're both grown out of the house. One's a computer engineer, and the other one's a school teacher, and they both live out of state. And I was stay-at-home mom most of my life. I worked some part-time, full-time until we had kids, but then part-time. And I'm real involved in Bible study fellowship and my church.
And Ken, how about you? Give us a little of your background.
I'm a family physician. I been doing that now for 40 years. Hard to believe. My background before all that, I was a typical kid in high school, played sports and had a chance to play in college, but decided I had a better chance of getting into medical school than becoming a professional athlete. So I kind of put that aside and went that way. And I had my own practice for 25 years, till pretty much the government and insurance companies forced doctors out of being able to have their own practice for the most part. So I've been working for the man for 10 years of the 40-year career. So
Well, I met you guys first. You came to a class that I was teaching on retirement. And so I think that that's an important starting point for our listeners, is to just to think like, when you first decided to attend that class and start kind of what I call getting really into the details of the process of retirement, what motivated you? Was there something in particular that made you want to start that process? I mean, that was a pretty long class. If I remember, that was like a 6-hour class. So that's pretty serious when somebody decides to sit through 6 hours of training to talk about retirement. So what motivated that, and how'd you get started?
We worked with Ron Blue Trust a little bit, never got completely embedded with them, but did some classes and some help on some things with them. There were some very nice people that we were working with, because I had been working with someone that my sister had for several years, but I knew as we were approaching that my situation was a fairly complex situation with lots of moving parts and not having, certain things that some people have when they're parts of companies and stuff. But the thing with the Blonde Run Trust, reason we did not continue to work with them on that is they wanted to pick your investments based on your aversion to risk. And I just felt like my and our investments for retirement need to be based on us, not 20% of a group that was high risk, liked high risk, or 20% that liked low risk, or says, sometimes you need to be in high risk, sometimes you need to be in low risk, and it need to be tailored to us specifically. And that's what I didn't like with that. And so we had kind of been doing that, and I knew I was getting the situation. I kind of feel like you should always be putting money away for retirement. I had that pretty much instilled, by my father back in the day when I was in college, and didn't have to have show income. He would put money in my IRA when I was in college. And so some of the money that I have started from back then. And so we've always been pretty diligent about putting money away, but there's a lot of decisions in retirement, from when to take Social Security, when to start drawing off your IRAs, the Roth conversions, health insurance. And for us, a difference in age of 3 years, where if I'm going on Medicare and my wife, Tammy, is not on Medicare, then she's still going to need health insurance. So, uh, so we just felt like there was a lot of moving parts in it that I think it's really hard for an average person to be an expert in all these things.
How about for you, Tammy? What was it like for you in those early moments of kind of trying to sort this out? What was motivating you to do those classes and to engage in the topic?
Well, I think Ken was really, starting to get serious about retirement, starting to really think about it. And I think we got the flyer in the mail from you, and it was at the Brownsburg Library, so it was close. And I knew that our age difference was a big factor in it, and I just knew we had to figure it out. There were just so many questions. I think Medicare and Social Security are my biggest. Like, I still don't understand them. It's so confusing to me. When you can take it, when you can't, penalties if you don't, all that kind of thing. So I'd say that was probably the main thing. Just trying to help Ken out. Let's get it figured out.
Well, you're really good at, you're like leading us right into the next question there, Tammy, with your statement, which is, what do you find challenging or difficult, about this decision? I know, Ken, you brought up a lot of the key things. So, you talked about differences in ages related to health insurance. You've talked about Social Security. You've brought up really, I think, a question that you and I talk about a lot, which is what I call is, which account do we take the money out of when we retire? Which one, when do we take money out of IRAs? So, I mean, out of all those, like, is there one that, for you, Ken, Tammy kind of said that the Medicare and the Social Security are big issues for her. What do you find to be the most challenging part of this decision?
The whole thing is, so there's so many decisions that you have to make. And if you wait till you're 72, they're already set in stone. You, it's like you have to be proactive, trying to figure out the best path. It's kind of like when you go on a trip and you're looking at the map. Well, there's the fastest way, probably taking the interstates. There's a scenic way, And then there's sometimes a combination of what's the fastest way and the scenic way, like to get a little bit of both. Well, I think it's kind of like this in this whole retirement pathway. There's different paths that you can go, and you're trying to find what's the right balance for you specifically. For some people, they just only have 5 days. They need to get there and get back on a trip. And some people, they got 4 weeks. They can take their time and meander all they want. And I think everybody, it's a specific for every person. When people say, well, this is how I did it, and this is how I did it, and this is how I did it. I think no one way is the perfect way for everybody. That's why I go back to the Ron Blue Trust thing. To me, I just felt like we needed it to be specific for us and not go down the wrong path, not make stupid decisions that we would regret.
And I know we're actually months away from you, what I call actually pulling the trigger from leaving employment completely. But you have a little bit of a complicated case in terms of the fact that you had what I'm going to call multiple employers, and some of the demands on your time. You had a few different things that you were doing. And quite honestly, we're seeing that more and more, right? We're seeing that more and more of our clients have not just one primary employer or one way that they make a living, but that they kind of have multiple paths. So maybe, Tami, I think that you were the one also, you worry a little bit. Ken works a lot. He was, how many different places were you working at one point? Probably like four.
Four,
So you had
yeah, four.
what I call a regular 9 to 5 plus a few side jobs. And that was a lot of hours. And so I know that was one of your concerns, is just how to ramp him down, right? So that somebody that worked that many hours, and how do you slow down? And I know we've talked a little bit about practicing and cutting hours back. And so just how has that impacted you guys as he's done more of that over the last year?
It's been good that it's been a gradual thing, because I worry also, I want him to slow down, but I'm used to being by myself during the day and just picking up. And if I want to go up to the north side and shop, or south side, or just, whatever I want to do, I just go do it. I don't tell anyone, or, not that he cares, but, I feel like as a courtesy thing, if someone's in your house, you say, hey, I'm leaving, And so, so that's always like a fear, just how's that going to look? And so we talk about it. We walk every night, and we've I think that's been really good for us as we've started this process. We tend to spend more time together in the evening. Even when he was working the other part-time job, it was from home, and so he'd do a little bit, we'd go walk, he'd come home, do a little bit more, so it's now that that's gone away, it's been nice. But I think the gradual thing is really important. I can't imagine just stopping cold turkey. So
Right.
Some people obviously don't have that choice, but that's been really good for us.
Yeah. How's that felt for you, Ken, as you've kind of ramped the hours back down a little bit, and just that process also of thinking through how to actually pick a date? I know that that's, a bit of a moving target, but just kind of maybe what's really gone through your head, both in terms of the number of hours that you're working, but kind of why it's moved around a little bit, and how that, to be honest, that's kind of normal. I know it sounds weird, but most people just don't have this fantastic day where everything stops. Most people are trying to kind of figure it out. So I know you spend a lot of time around that. Can you kind of share with us how you thought through that, and how you've worked towards it?
Well, I used to always joke when somebody say, what do you think you'll do with your time when you're retired? And, I'd say, well, I don't know, but I think I'm up for the challenge um, of not having all the time working and doing other stuff, because I can find stuff to do. I think may not get paid for them. That was one of the big things in transition, because I remember my sister is 7 years older than me, and I was talking to her about it one time. She said the hardest adjustment that they had to make was seeing their bank account begin to go down instead of continuing to rise. And coming from the background with my dad and all that stuff, net worth was kind of pounded into us that, take care of your money, make sure you got money put away and all that stuff. And that was really pounded into us. So that was one of my fears, was I don't want to go work at Walmart as a greeter at 80 because I ran out of money. That's not high on my list of things I want to do. And I'm 80 or 85 years old, is go back to work. When I quit, I wanted to be done. when I first started taking the part-time jobs, my thought was I could quit my full-time job at a certain point and just have those on the side where I could travel and do things with them, because I could do a lot of them on the computer, and still have some income coming in, because in my thought before, was to really delay taking the Social Security part, since it has the inflation escalation that you don't get. And then when they changed the rules on the IRAs, that was my concern. Like, I had gotten some inherited IRAs from my mom and dad when they passed, and I can take it for life, but my kids will not be able to do that. So that kind of, you can think yourself to death in all this at a certain point. But I liked the idea of still having some income coming in and not draining, because one of the things I wanted to do was hold on. I had a reasonable amount of money that was in non-retirement accounts, and I wanted to not blow through all that money before I completely retired. I wanted to be able to hold that until I was taking Social Security and starting to draw off IRAs and that sort of thing. I didn't want to blow through all the cash money that we had. And so I liked the idea of some part-time work. And as it kind of came about, the part-time jobs that had continued, and then I decided to cut back my full-time job so I could still have full benefits with Tammy needing the health insurance part. I felt like that was the way to do it. And then also they still contribute and make them match me up to half of whatever you did, up to 10%. So that's what I tried to make sure I was maxing out what they were real willing to do. I might as well take their free money. And so it was kind of the thought process in it all. And now it's turning out that I'm probably going to end them pretty much all but one at the same time. And the only reason I'm staying at the other is the people that I'm working on that one are both 64, and I told them I'd stay with them until they retired. So because to find somebody to replace me would be hard for them.
You hit on a lot of key things that we have with clients as they're thinking about kind of this ramping down. And when an employer allows that, it's really awesome, I think, because it does allow you to kind of transition. I've had several clients do it. And one of the key things that Ken brought up is understanding the rules around your benefits. Right. And so how many hours do I need to keep working, or what's that before, while I still receive a health insurance or also, 401k match and things like that. So always check in with your employer and understand what your rules are, so that you can do that. And then another thing that you brought up that I think is really important for our listeners is this idea of when we have a little bit of an age gap between one spouse and the other. And I don't think that your age gap is huge, but when we're talking about things like retiree benefits and medical in particular, 2 or 3 year gap. And this is once again something we see quite frequently between spouses, where one is going to be Medicare eligible and the other is not. And so that's a strategy, right, that we've got to think through. And I know it played into your decision making quite a bit because it was a concern, and it should be something that we evaluate. But at the same time, we can have other health insurance solutions. And so, Tammy had brought that up as one of her big concerns. So I just want everybody out there that's listening to understand that it's not something to just dismiss. We certainly have to have a plan for it. But we just recently went through this where we had a scenario where the one spouse was accepted a layoff. And in accepting that layoff, the other spouse had health benefits. And so they were going to go to the other spouse's health benefits. Not unbelievable here. Within 30 days, the other spouse actually got laid off. Their company reorganized. And they were like, whoa, our plan for health benefits just completely disappeared. And how do we deal with it? So back to, you hear me say this all the time. That's why you need me in your life, is all you got to do is call me. We got a guy for that, right? So we got him, connected with somebody, and they ended up getting health insurance coverage without much of an issue at all, because you also have COBRA. Whenever you have a job change, we have the ability to continue on with our benefits. It's not free, but we have that option until we find something else. So it's a great point, and I know that was something you've both brought up. So our listeners probably have that same concern, right? And then you also were talking about just the timing of it. And so I know you guys were doing some projects and stuff around the house, and Ken had a passion project of his. And so that's not uncommon either. So some people call them honeydew lists. Some people have got kind of like a great thing that they want to do. But Ken talked about, I talk about money being in three categories. And Ken just talked about the idea of he had non-qualified. He had money that wasn't in an IRA account or a Roth account. And he didn't want to go through all of it or drain it all before he started taking his IRA distributions. That's something else that we see quite a bit of. And could you, talk a little bit about how you were thinking about your projects? Right. You don't have to necessarily get into the dollar amounts, but it's not uncommon for people as they retire. You were talking about what to do with your time, that you got something that you want to do, either travel or fix up the house project or something. Maybe just talk about how that impacted your decision to retire or delay your retirement a little bit.
We had a lot of house projects that we wanted to complete. Some of them were things that just never got done. Some of them were maintenance items. Like we knew we needed a new roof when we built our house. It ended up being a bad time when everything went sky high on the building. So we had to not finish the basement, and we wanted to finish the basement, and we'd still like to get that done. And so a lot of these things I did not want to do while after I was retired. I want to get some of them done before I retired, while we still had income stream coming in. And then you talk about the passion project. Is that I have a car that I drove in high school that I inherited at 16 from my grandmother, who bought it new, which is a 1965 Chevelle. And I always looked at that as kind of as a retirement present to myself, as I'm going to get that car fixed back up. And I knew that when I finally got the estimate on that, it was a lot more expensive than what I thought it was going to be. So it's all these things that we wanted to do. And I knew a lot of them, it would be better to still be working while some of them were getting done, and not just be going through the money hand over fist that was in our non-retirement accounts. Because the other thing, we've talked about too is, some of these things of what Medicare will charge you for, depending on how much money you made, and all these types of things. So having the flexibility to be able to draw off some of the non-retirement money, but not blow through it all, as I wanted to maintain that all the way through the process.
How about for you, Tammy? What about, how have you thought about the projects and things?
Well, I know there are things, that we wanted to get done. And my fear is that Ken would retire and go, oh, we can't spend any more money. We just have to, just live on the basics. So we really want to get him done before, because, I guess that's my fear is, what's our monthly income going to look like once he doesn't bring in a normal paycheck anymore. And so, we wanted to get a lot of things done beforehand, and we have been. So it's been nice to have his paycheck along with, even though we're spending some of the money, we're still having money come in. So.
And I think that's great. And I think that I'm smiling here. It's hard to hear a smile on a podcast, but hopefully people can hear my smile, because the conversation that they're having is what I think a lot of couples go through, right? So the question marks around health insurance, the question marks, we didn't talk about it as much today, around when should I take my Social Security? Which account are we going to take money out of so that we get that paycheck? These are normal ways of thinking, and it's an adjustment for people to start thinking about it. And what I love about what Ken and Tammy have been doing here is that they've been making those adjustments, what I call rather slowly. Not all like on a day, like, okay, on this day, everything switches, right? We've even changed a little bit, like you said, on taking care of the projects around the house. And we started utilizing a little bit of that non-qualified money to do those things, but also making sure that we keep a level of cushion, of margin in our life around that, kind of as a threshold there. And so those are some of the things that we want to do. So are there, I know time just breezes by, but we're almost at our 30-minute mark here of what we try to do on these podcasts. So what what I'd like to say, is there anything else that you've learned from this process, maybe as a couple, that about one another? I loved hearing about the walks. I know that that sounds kind of silly, but going on a walk consistently and talking about these things is a huge, great piece of advice that I want our listeners to hear. Are there any other things that you guys kind of learned about each other in this process that you would like to pass on to our listeners?
I think really talking about just being really honest about expectations, just really, I think good communication is key to it all. Being, just being honest with, hey, I don't know if I'm going to like you being here all day long every day, and I'm not really worried that he's going to be bored or anything like that. But, I don't want I don't want every day to look like the weekend either. I'm a get up and go person, and Ken's more of a, oh, let's get started after lunch. And I'm like, no, I'm winding down after lunch. So that's kind of it's going to be a thing for us. So, but we talk about it. So.
Well, and I think that's really great, because I'm in a marriage. You talk about like night owls and larks, right? So those are the phrases for some people who like to stay up late, and some people are like early morning, and some people it's an adjustment. So I'm glad that you're saying things that practical, right? Because sometimes people are just talking about the money issues, and they're not talking about the practical, what I call everyday calendar issue of how do we live together. So thank you for sharing that. How about you, Ken? Is there something maybe that you learned about this that you'd like to share, that kind of maybe surprised you, or something that you weren't expecting in the process?
It can drive you crazy if you let it get in your head. And there's so many decisions, and it's really easy to start second guessing yourself or rethinking it. Or did I hear that right? Or am I making a good decision on this? I tend to be a very not fly by night, quick decision kind of person. My son's a lot like that. And I teased him one time about that. I never had to worry about him making a wrong decision. It was just that sometimes he took so long to get to him. I was afraid he was going to miss opportunities sometimes. But it's kind of like talking to myself a little bit too. I don't just do things quick off the handle. I think them through. And I think the two most quick on the fly decisions we've made recently was vehicles that we bought. And basically one of them, the circumstances drove us to do one of them, and the other one was just, it was a completely, I just would really like to have that car kind of decision, which, 30 years ago, I couldn't have made that decision, so trying to not let it just drive you crazy, because I think it can really get in people's heads when they're trying to make some of the decisions. And I know there's some people just do not make good decisions.
Like, meeting with Brett and doing your research was really important. I think that really helped us, like going to your class and then meeting with you over time. And you didn't have us make big decisions quickly either. So I think you were a good fit for Ken and I, because he wasn't going to do anything right away.
Right. No, and I think those are that's the part of this conversation, right? Is to learn people's personalities.
Mhm.
And Ken said that right out of the gate today, which is, and I think something that we all need to hear. And I know as we wrap up our time together on this episode is fit. He talked about that, of finding a fit, and finding, as Tammy's bringing out here, is that I've heard it said this time is we're not for everybody, but we're for somebody. Right. And the way that we do things are a little bit specific. And Ken probably used almost all my buzzwords today almost accidentally as we talk about handcrafted. Well, what's that mean? He goes, he wanted something that was custom. He didn't want something that was exactly like, everybody else that checked certain boxes that way. So why are we handcrafted, right? Why are we able to be patient and to do these things so that we are the right fit for someone that is a bit more methodical in their decision making, and it isn't going to make snap quick decisions, right? Because we're talking about trying to make financial decisions that are going to last for the rest of your life. And we may make adjustments along the way, but having confidence in them and everything, that's very, very important. So I just really thank you guys for your honesty today.
Everybody's retirement everybody's retirement path is going to be different. Everybody's circumstances are going to be different. So I think I think it almost always needs to be specific for that family because you know, you may have somebody who is making $250,000 a year and somebody who is making $60,000 a year and somebody that has a pension and somebody that doesn't have a pension and somebody that everybody's some families got 12 kids, some got one kid, some have no kids. I mean, it's everybody's retirement path is going to be unique to them. That's what I just feel like it has to be specific for that family. What's right for them is not necessarily what's right for another family.
Well, you're speaking my language, Ken. So with that, I'm gonna hand it back to Wendy and let her do our wrap up stuff. But thank you guys, Ken and Tami, for just taking your time and sharing with our audience today. Your honesty and transparency about the process was awesome. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, Brett, how do people get in touch with you if they want you to handcraft their retirement?
Well, Wendy, they got to go to this wonderful World Wide Web place out there. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't like carrying it around in my pocket, but if you go to www.artisanwealthstrategies.com, you can find me. And then you can get on my calendar. There's this wonderful little button right there that sends you right to my email and gets you on my calendar. So that's the best way to find us. And we look forward to getting to know you and meeting you and helping you with your retirement.
All right. Well, thank you to all of you today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to Handcrafting Your Retirement. Visit our website at www.artisanwealthstrategies.com or give us a call at 317-660-2855. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Artisan Wealth Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC.